year is 1347 and the ships never arrive. The docks of Sicily sit empty under a pale October sky. No rats, no fleas, no whispers of death crawling through the alleyways of Europe. The plague that should have killed half the continent simply never comes. History holds its breath, and then it moves forward, but not the way you know it. In our world, 25 million people vanished in 5 years. Cities turned into graveyards, entire bloodlines erased. But in this world, those people live. They wake up, they work, they have children who have children who have children, and that single difference, that one invisible thread left uncut, unravels everything. Europe in 1350 doesn't smell like mass graves. It smells like crowded streets. The population that should have collapsed keeps growing. Peasants keep flooding into villages that are already too full. There's not enough land, not enough grain, not enough work. In our timeline, the plague emptied the fields and gave the survivors power. Workers could demand wages, serfs could walk away. The old feudal system started cracking, but here, nothing cracks. The lords still own everything. The church still collects its taxes, and the people, millions more of them, stay trapped. A farmer's son in France looks at his father's tiny plot of land and knows there's no room for him. A girl in England watches her brothers inherit nothing because there are too many mouths and not enough bread. The pressure builds, silent and slow like water freezing in stone. By 1370, the unrest is everywhere. Revolts that never happened in our world begin to spark. Not because of plague trauma, but because of something worse. Endless, grinding poverty with no escape. The Peasants' Revolt of 1381 in England still happens, but it's bigger, angrier, more desperate. There are twice as many hungry people with nothing to lose. The uprisings spread to France, to the Holy Roman Empire, to Spain. Some are crushed, some succeed for a season, but the world stays medieval longer. The Renaissance, that explosion of art and thought and rediscovery, doesn't arrive on time. Because the Renaissance needed something our world had: empty space. In the real 1400s, labour was expensive and life was cheap in reverse. Suddenly a sculptor mattered. A thinker mattered. Wealth flowed into culture because there were fewer hands to hoard it. But in this timeline, there's no scarcity of workers. Human life is still abundant, still replaceable. The Italian city-states stay merchant hubs, but they don't become the glittering centres of humanism. There's no Medici Golden Age, no explosion of Michelangelo and Leonardo. Not yet. The printing press still gets invented, but it spreads slower. Fewer people can read. Fewer people have time to think about anything except survival. The Reformation comes late, or maybe it comes differently. Martin Luther nails his theses to a door in a world where the church is even stronger, because it never lost a third of its priests to plague. The authority of Rome never wavered. The fear of God's wrath never spiked the way it did when bodies piled in the streets. So when reform finally tries to break through, the church has more soldiers, more gold, more control. The religious wars that should have torn Europe apart in the 1500s might come a century later, or they might be even bloodier. And the New World? Columbus still sails in 1492. But the Europe he leaves behind is poorer, more crowded, more desperate. The colonies don't just become opportunities, they become pressure valves. Millions more Europeans flood across the Atlantic, not for glory, but for survival. The indigenous peoples of the Americas face an even larger wave of invasion. Diseases still devastate them, but now the settlers who follow are hungrier, more ruthless, more numerous. The genocide becomes faster. The land gets carved up with even less mercy. By 1600, the Americas are already unrecognizable, stripped and exploited by an overcrowded continent that needed an outlet. Back in Europe, the population never stabilizes. Famine hits harder. Wars over resources become constant. The 30 Years' War, already one of the most brutal conflicts in history, drags on longer, or repeats in cycles. Because in our world, the Black Death reset the scale. It gave humanity room to breathe, to rebuild, to rethink. But in this world, there's no reset. Just endless crowding, endless competition, endless struggle. Technology advances, but slower. The Industrial Revolution, which needed both labour surplus and capital investment, stumbles England in 1750 is still feeding too many mouths with too little land. Factories rise eventually, but the working conditions are even worse because workers are even more disposable child labour, starvation, wages, urban squalor, all the horrors of industrialisation, but amplified. The Enlightenment happens, but its ideas spread through a world that's harder, colder, more cynical. Liberty and equality sound beautiful, but they clash against the reality of too many people fighting for too few chances. Revolutions still ignite, but they're messier, more fractured. The French Revolution might collapse into military dictatorship even faster. Napoleon might rise, or someone like him, but ruling over a continent that's even more unstable. And then the 20th century arrives. 2 world wars still seem inevitable because Europe is still a powder keg, but now it's packed even tighter. The trenches of World War I are filled with even more soldiers. The Holocaust, driven by the same evil ideologies, finds even more victims because Europe's Jewish population never took the same demographic hit. The death tolls climb higher. The Cold War might be shorter or longer, but the nuclear arms race happens in a world that's already more desperate, more willing to gamble with annihilation. By the year 2000, Earth's population isn't 6 billion. It's 8, maybe 9. Climate change accelerates faster. Resources run out sooner. The migrations, the conflicts, the environmental collapse, all the crises we're facing now, they arrive a generation early. And somewhere in all that chaos, a historian sits in a library that might not exist in our world, flipping through records of a plague that never came, and wonders if mercy sometimes wears the mask of catastrophe. Because the Black Death was horror, it was agony and loss and grief beyond measure. But it was also, accidentally, a release valve. It broke the chains of feudalism. It made labour valuable. It created space for new ideas, new art, new systems. It was the worst thing that could have happened, and maybe, in some twisted way, one of the best. In this alternate world, humanity survives, but it never quite thrives. The overcrowding creates a different kind of plague, the slow, grinding erasure of possibility, no single event to point to, no mass grave to mark the turning point, just a world that stayed too full for too long and never learned the bitter lesson that sometimes loss creates room for rebirth. So the ships never dock, the rats never come, and history marches forward, not into a golden age, but into a grey and endless crowd. The bells that should have tolled for the dead stay silent, and in that silence a different kind of darkness grows,